Hello and welcome back to Continental Club Xtra, where we show Premier League fans exactly what they've been missing from across the continent. Now, this is news that I don't think you would have missed, but Graham Potter was fired as Chelsea manager on Sunday, the second Premier League manager to lose their job at the weekend, taking the amount of managerial changes in the Premier League this season to 13. Julian Nagelsmann, recently removed from office at Bayern Munich, is the favourite. On Monday, Fabrizio Romano tweeted that the German coach was open to discuss a long-term project with Chelsea. A long-term project that does not exist there at the moment. Anyway, with Nagelsmann let go less than 2 years into his 5-year contract, worth a reported €8 million per season, Bayern can demand compensation from whoever hires him, and it's already been an expensive year for Todd Boehly. They paid a £30 million payoff for Tuchel. £21 million was paid to Brighton for Potter, while the Guardian report Potter is due a payout similar to what Tuchel got. So it's going to be very expensive to bring in Nagelsmann. But Macabs, for anyone that's been living under a rock over the last few years, who is Julian Nagelsmann and why is he being linked with this job?
Most people watching this will know who he is, but maybe not necessarily everyone will be that familiar with his kind of work before Bayern and Leipzig at least. And of course, he's only 35 years old. He's been in the kind of first team managerial game since he was 28 years old. So he has already a lot of experience despite his youth. He's obviously been, regarded as the kind of next big thing, the next kind of Pep, Klopp, that level, that's the kind of ambition that he has, and that's, for a long time what the kind of football world has kind of been anticipating in terms of the kind of mark he could leave at a big club. And obviously it didn't work out at Bayern Munich, but he's done some amazing things in his pretty young career. He was appointed at Hoffenheim, like I said, when he was just 28. He'd been working with the under 19 since 2013 at that point. And at the time when he came into the job, Hub Stevens resigned in February 2016. Hoffenheim were joint bottom of the Bundesliga. I think they were only 17th on goal difference. And within 18 months, he took them into the Champions League and really made them a force in German football for his tenure there. And then with Leipzig, first season took them to the Champions League semi-finals, came runners-up in the Bulli and the DFB Pokal in 2021. Unfortunately, didn't manage to secure their first piece of silverware. With Bayern Munich, it was obviously a mixed bag, wasn't it? He only won 5 of his final 10 games there. I think their record over the course of the Bundesliga season when he was sacked was their kind of worst showing after 25 games in 11 years. So there was reason to be concerned, but nevertheless, it was still quite a harsh sacking. They just picked apart PSG, a PSG side containing Messi, Mbappe, Neymar for the first leg at least in the Champions League last 16. They had a quarter-final against Freiburg coming up in the Pokal. So yeah, there's still all to play for, and they, got in Thomas Tuchel, who tactically at least quite a similar manager to him. And of course, they won pretty easily against Dortmund on the weekend. Had Nagelsmann stayed, would have been different. It's hard to say, isn't it? But I think the main area of concern, at least from a Bayern perspective, was his relationship with the dressing room. There was that Honigstein article that came out in The Athletic last week, essentially saying that he's never really developed much of a relationship with the dressing room. Kimmich was his kind of main ally in there, but he doesn't necessarily hold all the power. Someone like Manuel Neuer, who he obviously got on the wrong side of, at least allegedly, after sacking his long-time goalkeeper coach who'd been there for the entirety of Neuer's Bayern career. Thomas Müller subbed him off early in important games, didn't he? Wasn't seen supposedly as the kind of father figure that the Bayern dressing room were kind of crying out for. Essentially just didn't really fit the culture of the club. And even with young players like Ryan Gravenberch, just didn't really give him a chance. He only got his first start in February, was subbed off at half-time. So that's the kind of how Nagelsmann has got to this position. But as for Chelsea, it's an interesting one. I think Nagelsmann is probably the best manager out there right now who's available. But he'd be going from one job where, he didn't quite fit the culture or whatever, or, didn't quite meet expectations, to another club where, it's just hard to know, like, how easy that job's going to be at all, which we'll get onto. I think if I was a Chelsea fan, I'd be hopeful, but also I don't think you can expect him to come in and perform miracles instantly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you say he didn't quite fit the culture at Bayern. I don't really know what the culture is at Chelsea at the moment. It seems like an absolute mess since Todd Boehly's takeover last summer. I mean, Henry, tactically, this is a very versatile manager. Do you think he could create an 11 that could, if he was to come in, challenge over the next few years?
Well, one thing for sure about this Chelsea squad is he's got a ton of players to mess around with.
Yeah.
This is the great question, is what is this team going to look like at the end of the summer? Because, as we kind of discussed briefly last week, by I think about June the 30th, they'll have had to have offloaded a number of players in order to potentially make their balance look a bit better for the next calendar year. And there's definitely players that are going to have to go. We were reading reports today that, the first team dressing room is so crammed for meetings that some players are having to sit on the floor, which really is not what you'd expect for a Premier League club. So there is going to be a big sort of fire sale at Chelsea. There is going to be a lot of change of personnel.
Also, just bring in more chairs.
Yeah, bring in more chairs. Yeah, look, that budget's tight at the Chelsea these days. We've been spending too much on Zach Jalab. So it's interesting really to see what they can do. And I do think they've got personnel. I think what Nagelsmann would be quite good at is operating without maybe a main centre forwards. In many senses, I don't think he had a classic centre forward at Leipzig during his time there, and so I think the ones.
Werner's still scored like 28 goals for him.
Yeah, but I mean he's capable of pushing up, but he often would start deeper and drive forward, and actually his success was playing on the transition. It really wasn't being what he was meant to be at Chelsea, which is a possession-heavy sort of hold-up guy. So that's where if you look at what Werner did well, it was sort of starting back, and that is the kind of players that he will have at his disposal. Havertz is a similar guy, actually is at his best in a transitional kind of team. So I think it would be great news for Havertz to get someone like Nagelsmann through the door. And you know what, Havertz, to his credit, is the top scorer for the club this season. I think that someone like Sterling would definitely benefit from his management, which is a bit more similar to Pep in terms of the kind of the tactics that you've talked about. So the 4-2-2-2 would be an interesting one, certainly with Mount as well, if he stays at the club this summer. Certainly lots of speculation about that. They've got a lot of those energetic midfielders that could fit into his system. But it's really hard to say what's going to happen. What you can expect is a high press team. The thing is, it's so hard to compare German tactics and translate them over to the English game, because in German football, I think Pat did a good piece on this recently, it's a lot more about playing on the transition. It's a lot more about sort of sitting deep and then hitting teams fast, whereas we're in the Premier League, a lot of teams try and dominate each other a lot more. So you do have to switch up your tactics, and that's why we've seen a few Bundesliga players come over here, like Werner, and struggle to really implement themselves. And I think Nagelsmann would run into the same issues. I do wonder also if he will have the kind of authority over the squad in the same facing the same problems that perhaps Potter had with the club, and that Nagelsmann suffered during his previous role at Bayern Munich. Because, if you look at the super coaches of today, Pep Guardiola did have time. He was a super player. He was a great player for Barcelona from the club, commanded that respect. Ancelotti had a pretty good playing career. Even sort of Klopp building up his foundation at Mainz, where he was also a great legend as a player too. So I wonder if his lack of sort of playing career within the modern context of the game today, with more entitlement within players, is maybe something that doesn't always rub off on the players necessarily, and he's got a lot of big egos he's going to have to deal with. So I do think that Nagelsmann would have a very difficult time of this going into this dressing room after what was quite a damaging sort of year and a half in Bayern Munich. But I think he is very tactically flexible. We saw him change up the formation a fair few times for Bayern Munich this season, dropping players like Musiala deeper, pushing other players forward. He's managed to get a load of goals out of Eric Choupo-Moting, which shows that what he can do with a lot of the players at his disposal. I think that's kind of people don't really respect what he did with Choupo-Moting. He made someone who was sort of derided in the Premier League one of the kind of top 20 strikers in Europe at the moment, you have to say. So, I think he's certainly got a lot more credit than this harsh sacking at Bayern Munich will will afford him. If he was going to take it, he has to take it sooner rather than later and have a full pre-season of trying to embed his ideology, because that's what Potter didn't have, and that's ultimately cost him. Because I feel so sorry for Graham Potter, I really do.
Yeah, I mean, that is the difficulty with this Chelsea squad. I mean, there's a number of players signed up to massively long contracts that Nagelsmann or any incoming manager just might not want, might not rate at all. And there's clubs around Europe that don't have very much money, so offloading them, as we said in January, it's going to be really, really difficult. And they've already changed twice their manager in the first 10 months of this Boehly long-term project, and it just is looking like a bit of a mess. For me, I think Nagelsmann would be an amazing appointment for Chelsea, but is Chelsea a great place for Nagelsmann to go next? Not really, when he needs to reassert himself as one of Europe's most up-and-coming coaches and banish this sort of talk that he can't manage top personalities, can't manage top egos at the biggest clubs. So for me, I think he could stay clear of this.
I know I'm probably going to get derided for this, but I actually think Spurs would be more interesting for him just because they need to buy so many players in the summer, and he really could implement his methodology on that side that is desperately crying out for some fresh impetus. I'm not saying it's obviously a better project in principle than Chelsea. I mean, they'll have European football for sure next season in some capacity. I'm not saying it's going to be better. I'm not saying it's a bigger club or anything, but I'm just saying in terms of a manager looking at something and going, how can I really implement a change here? I think that Spurs is at least got an owner with a bit more stability. It's got a core of a squad that know the club, etc., amazing facilities, whatnot. That would, for me, would be more attractive for someone like Nagelsmann than Chelsea at this moment in time. Although, I mean, there's something, the allure of Chelsea is always going to be great.
I think I agree to an extent in that at least there is, at least Spurs, there aren't the question marks over FFP at the moment, whereby, if Nagelsmann does want a certain player, or at least he can work with the recruitment team over getting who he wants in. I think that's the main issue with Chelsea, like you were saying, Dukes, is just the situation that he's inheriting. I don't think he'd have a problem as long as he likes the players at the club and he thinks he can do stuff with them to get them playing in any way he wants. He took over that Leipzig side and turned them from a transitional side into a possession side. And Tuchel did have a pretty, quite a lot of joy actually in his first year, turning that Chelsea team into a very defensively solid, possession-based team that at least when the wing-backs were fit were really, really effective. So tactically, I don't think he'd struggle, but it is just that question of does he want, does he want Mudryk for the next 8 years or whatever? Which actually, to be fair, Mudryk isn't really the problem. It's more so what happens this summer. He might come in and he's like, well, I really want Mount. And Mount might be like, well, actually, I've made my decision. I don't want to stay at the club. I feel like an appointment like that would be, would hopefully for someone like Mount be like, actually, maybe I do want to stay and work under this, emerging world-class coach. But there's just lots of uncertainty at Chelsea at the moment. Lots of stuff where we're not really sure how much power the manager's really going to have when he comes in. So, that would be what I'm sceptical about.
One final thing. If I was Chelsea, if Luis Enrique is available and doesn't go to Atletico Madrid, I think getting someone in with international management experience who's had to be sort of used to working with what he's got. He didn't do a terrible job at Spain, let's be honest. And he did produce one of the best Barcelona sides ever in many ways, and he's quite flexible with his tactics, and he's great at working with what is at his disposal. I actually think Luis Enrique would be a much smarter choice for this Chelsea side, given everything he's achieved.
Okay, there we have it, guys. What do you guys think? We've basically come to the conclusion that Chelsea would be very lucky to have Julian Nagelsmann, but Nagelsmann might not be too lucky to take over this Chelsea squad at the moment. It could all change in 6 months, 12 months. It does feel like a project that is just going through the ringer right now. Guys, let us know who you'd rather appoint, Luis Enrique, Julian Nagelsmann, someone else in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Eurofootball Daily, and we'll catch you later in the week. Bye-bye.